can glean from what he shared, no? There's still so much to do in PEI. Dami pa. But we hope that we can all together work to generate interest in our spheres of influence, no, about this topic, as well as we to help social civic sector and the public to join this conference of ours and also to spur conversations about the value of DEI in our lives. So at this point, I'd like to open the floor for questions about their theme at the conference. And then I call Sir Edwin and Sir Shem on stage to answer the questions. While we are formulating our thoughts together, recall for the question now. So let me get the ball rolling. Alright. So ask the first question. So Sir Shem and Sir Edric, if you could share your thoughts on this question. So how can companies move AI from just being a topic of conversation to actual practical programs?
So I was having this conversation, because of course, as we're doing the planning for the forum, we also have to discuss about what DEI means to us. And then one of the letters that I kind of like focus on was the concept of equity versus equality. And I'm sure a lot of you guys have seen the memes on Facebook explaining, where there's kind of like the fence to watch a game, and then the fence is the same height for everyone, so that's equality. But then one guy is tall enough to look over the fence, and the other two are too short to look over the fence. So that's equality. But then when you talk about equity, then you see sort of the other two standing on boxes appropriate for their height, so that everyone is able to like look over the fence. And that's really what it comes down to. So the whole point of equity and diversity and inclusion is that there isn't one solution for every group. Now you can't, or you can if you're big enough, and I encourage you to. But I think for a lot of like smaller and medium companies, of course you can't. A lot of them don't have the capacity to be equitable all in one go to every diverse group. So I think it would be also to select a group to start, because you can be equitable to everyone eventually, but you have to start somewhere and you have to make the move. I gave my example kanina about like looking at when I was looking at programs to get more PWDs into the company. But then you can also look at diversity in other contexts as well, such as women. In our case, we had existed for about like 18 years without any women in the board. Even though we're 52% women, I think, but then it's been a recent thing of like, adding women to the board so that there are women making those leadership decisions. So even small steps like that and having diverse voices at the board and at the executive level, and then the people from those communities, having them there and part of the conversation within, and not talking just to like outside groups, but really hiring and having it part of your leadership team from within, then they can start saying like, hey, this is how we can be more considerate of women. I mean, there's a lot of I think women is sort of like the easiest reach, because it's the most, and most companies have women. But like in our company, we have higher maternity leave than the legal requirement. I think going beyond compliance when it comes to this group is a big part, because you're required to do compliance. You don't get a pat in the back for that. But I think taking it a step beyond, having rooms for pumping for breast milk, to be more inclusive of young mothers, because women disproportionately do the child raising, even though they work just as much as the husband does. So being able to find ways to accommodating that, and also what is required here is maternal leave, but we need to also be looking at like paternal leave, and this isn't a vacation for dad. It's an idea that by having men more involved in the parenting, then it divides the labor at home. So the woman is not 100% working two jobs, the job at home and the job in the office. So that's just like one example. Yeah.
Those are not actually, but very interesting. Because like I remember one example from my company. Sometimes we think that you have to do something, the grand gestures. But then we discovered when we spoke with the women in our team, and then incidentally, yes, a lot of us are in the childbearing age. So what they wanted was just a room for them to breastfeed and to have that accommodation that they can have that space at the time for them to do that thing for them, and everybody happy after that. And also one more was that a very actually it sounds common, it's common sense, but we had let's say accommodation, or not exactly accommodation. We changed the rule in terms of claiming for mental health for common law and same-sex couples. I mean, that was actually an eye opener that nobody thought. Okay, there wasn't. It seemed that the company was giving the benefit, but then when we had the discussion, then it became apparent that there's a need for that to be recognized. So yes, recognizing and giving voice to the minority. So thank you, Sir Jeff. That's a lot of actually very good examples. Sir Edric?
I was thinking that everything should start at the organizational culture. So everything should be ingrained from the very beginning at the core and at the heart of the organization. So, iniisip ko, hindi lang sa HR magsisimula ito. Dapat gumapang from top to bottom or bottom to top. Kailangan na tingnan ito if we are following DEI. So Knowledge Channel Foundation where I work, I think 70-75% of our employees are females. Maraming single, marami ding may mga anak, marami ding nagdadala ng mga anak sa office. At we encourage those things, yung ganun act. Kasi nakakatulong sa amin, and it gives opportunity for the moms to still work despite like having kids, mga toddlers, no? So nagkakaroon kami ng alaga. At the same time, nagkakaroon kami ng inspiration. Di ba? There was a time also that we would hire mga persons with special needs. Even mga OJTs namin before would have that, yung mga batches na dumarating na mga ganun. No? So opening up, coming out with the policies, HR, entertaining sa management level, top management level, at kahit sa ranks, ang DEI na it's as natural as it should be.
So opening our perspective, kasi doon din pumapasok yung ating mga unconscious bias, which does happen naman talaga. So thank you for those answers. So from the floor, does anybody have some clarifications? Yes, go ahead.
Hello, good morning. My name is Alden Monzon, business news reporter from the Philippine Daily Inquirer. My question is for the two gentlemen. With LCF making DEI the focus this year, how do we measure the success, including the return on social investment or impact per peso?
Well, that's a little bit different, diba? Because a lot of this stuff is about raising awareness in the context. So I think one thing also really important to note about LCF, is in the first letter is the league. So what we are is basically an association of foundations. Well, that's a different group, but we're a group of foundations where that are specifically corporate, that where we can't force our members to do anything. So the biggest part of what LCS does is sharing our experiences and sharing our knowledge to encourage. What we do though is we do track projects across our membership, and then recently we've combined it with Association of Foundations, which is another group, to be able to track not just with the corporates but with foundations across the board in the Philippines. And I think it's a good question because it's one that we haven't thought of, I think, yet in terms of measurement, but it's certainly one to consider in continuing what happens after, as you pointed out, that maybe we should also be including in those questionnaires by identifying different marginalized groups, and then having the responders identify which, if any, marginalized groups are covered by those programs. So thank you for that question, because it's one that we don't have an answer to yet, but sometimes in not having an answer but having the questions raised, that's where you can find a solution. And I think that's a relatively simple solution that we can do in order to see what kind of impact. The unfortunate thing of coming up with the ideas, we don't have a baseline from before the Expo, but we can certainly keep tracking it after.
Pero sir, what's the initial assessment pa, sir, on how to gauge the results? Like, are you gauging it through the, I guess, the gender mix or something like that?
We do have a speaker. I'm not sure if it's today or if it's at the Expo, so he might be able to confirm, who is basically looking at the data, but it's not narrowly Philippine specific. It's I think ASEAN specific. So it would be against that information. Yeah, because we're partnering with a group that is looking at that info in the Philippine context right now. Yeah. But sorry, the ASEAN context.
Sorry, sir. Sir, another question. Sir, how's the funding environment, including the donations for CSR programs in 2024, and what is your outlook this year? Is it shrinking, or is it steady, or is it rising?
Dalawang klase ang mga members ng LCF. Yung isang grupo dyan, like sila Chef, are para grant-giving foundations.
No, project.
Okay, so hindi sila Chef. And then yung isang...
Did you not see the solar panels?
Kaya nga pala, we was talking about it kanina, early this morning. Yung isa namang grupo are grant-seeking foundations, like us, the Knowledge Channel Foundation. So all the time, every day, we would look for partners to help us carry through our advocacies and our projects. And kasama doon sa mga hinihingi usually sa mga as grant requirements, yung DEIs. So dapat nakalagay doon na how many people will be like, how many females will be working on this project, how many, are you employing IPs, are you employing persons with different needs, differently abled persons. So may mga points yan. So all the time, nilalagay namin yan. Meron kaming count on that kasi hinihingi yan ng mga nagbibigay ng mga grants. Okay. Yung question mo naman, I think parang this 2024 and this 2025, para sa amin, sa education, at saka specifically on early childhood development, parang there's so much focus that we want to happen naman sa education and early childhood development. So marami na nagbibigay ng mga opportunities, nagbibigay ng mga grants that we wanted. Not just from the private sector but also from mga government agencies na rin natin. So ang iniisip nga namin, paano natin i-harness yung mga ganitong opportunities and make do of what the government or what the other private sector practitioners, stakeholders are providing to make sure that we get to make use of these funds and provide the impact na kailangan dun sa sector na yan.
So yung funding environment, sir, it's improving, sir,
I think para sa early childhood development.
for that, sir.
Uh,
How about you, sir?
Yeah, so as Edric also pointed out, you know, there are grant givers and there are grant receivers. In our case, though, you know, we are a league of corporate foundations. So in most cases, our primary source of income comes from the corporation. So you know, and the Philippines has a very strong CSR context. In fact, you know, I was talking about ASEAN earlier, but you know, one thing we've been looking to do since the end of the pandemic is reestablish ties with other CSR networks around ASEAN, but a lot of them have actually shuttered. You know, I think the Philippines has one of the strongest in terms of corporate giving in the ASEAN region. But then also a lot of, so we're less affected by some of the international grant givers, although a lot of us have benefited it as well. Vivant Foundation from 2019 to 2022 received a grant from the European Union for sustainable energy. You know, but really the ones that rely a lot more on the big international grants tend to be not the corporate foundations because they don't have that regular income from a corporation. And I know that that sector is being affected by USAID and everything that's been happening there. There are other international grant giving agencies such as AusAid, which does a lot in the Philippines for disaster resilience. I gave the example of the European Union, but USAID has certainly been a major one, and right now, less us, but more other groups that don't have the corporate focus. I know that they're currently assessing the impact of you know, a lot of the grants by USAID just being stopped. So there is that sort of asterisk there. I think in the local context of local giving for local causes, you see it pretty steady and steadily increasing. But in the international terms, this is a very recent development. So yeah.
alam mo yung freeze sa USAID projects in the Philippines, nag-open up naman yung iba pang mga grant giving organizations from other countries. So, natigil yung pinifund na dapat maraming lumabas eh. So, kung yung mga foundations lang would research and look for more connections, marami silang makikita.
I think we have one question here. We can now allow one last and then another one.
Hi, Marisa from the Society. You mentioned this LCF as this is since 2018. How can you compare the grant givers before to now? Like timeline, how fast now compared to before?
Sorry, just to clarify, 2019 was the beginning of the Guild Awards. LCF has been around since the 90s. Next year is 25th anniversary.
30.
Congratulations.
30 na tayo.
Okay, 30. Yeah, so we've been around as long as that. We do our sort of CSR 101 course where we actually do have a timeline of giving. And you know, we have seen it increase. And a big part of it is due to organizations like ours, but there's other ones as well, you know, that encourage business to give. Like I said, it's very strong in the Philippine context compared to a lot of our neighbors. And, you know, and of course the economy has grown, so that means there's also more wealth to spread around. But where you see a lot of like the changes has really been in how it is given and the methods and the approaches to it. I think like way back in the day in my grandfather's time, my grandfather was very involved with the Boy Scouts in the Philippines and the Sinulog Foundation back in Cebu. You know, and that's what it was. It's like what is the owner's personal interest? What touches their heart? Let's be honest, back then, what touches his heart? And that's where it goes. And then, you've seen it become more and more strategic, where it's less about charitable giving and more about aligning with the business. We see a lot of scholarships, but then a lot of the scholarships will be like, hey, let's build a potential base that we can hire, which seems in a bit of a way self-serving, but then you're also looking at how can we create jobs, or rather, how can we fill the jobs that we're already creating? You're again speaking from my personal experience with senior high school, and Tech Walk being like the second largest course after general academics for senior high school. So we wanted to improve Tech Walk in the Philippines because the more we provide energy and water as an energy and water company, the more you'll need electricians and plumbers at the household level. And so that's where we build, and it's more about aligning with what it is that you do as a business, because then you also bring your own expertise. And even more recently, and one of the reasons why 2 years ago our theme was on sustainability and sustainability reporting is that 2 years ago it became law that publicly listed companies like Levant and a lot of our members, corporations, have to do sustainability reporting. And a lot of non-listed companies are taking that option as well. So instead of like the foundation's work being like a side thing, it's becoming even more integrated because a lot of our work is being integrated into that sustainability reporting, which is why we also came up with a new course in the CSR Institute right after that conference, which goes back to your thing about what happens after. We want to continue it, so we created a course about how to align your CSR with sustainability reporting, and we encourage that the course is taken with one person from the foundation and one person from sustainability within the company about like coordination on how to report the work that's being done. So it's less in like the amount. I think the percentages remain relatively the same, but more on how it's being spent and how it aligns with the corporate goals.
So we have one more question.
Okay, sorry.
I'm sorry.
Did you want to say something?
Okay lang. Do you want me to answer ba? Well, hindi ko sinasabi na dito sa LCF, no? Pero in the past, maraming mga foundations, mga non-profits, kahit mga individuals, no? If they want to help, they measure success through counting output, di ba? Pero ngayon, makikita mo sa mga members ng LCF, hindi lang output yung binibilang, yung lalim ng nangyari sa kanilang mga beneficiaries. So, impact. At hindi lang mga one-time, big-time, one-shot deal, pero hindi, continuous yung engagement with the beneficiaries. And hindi lang na-concentrate sa isang sector. Ang tendency ngayon, yung trend ngayon is to go to community development. So, kasi alam naman natin na hindi naman nasa silo sa mga yan. So, tayong lahat ay part ng isang malaking community, and we should be helping each other, supporting each other.
Hi, good morning. I'm Vincent Ginaba from the Daily Review. I want to know how serious is the DEI business to LCF members. So how much have LCF members invested into DEI programs over the years and annually? And I have a second question. The DEI policies and programs in the US are being undone. So what are the impacts to the DEI movement in the Philippines?
So as I mentioned earlier, like the stuff that's happening in the state, because it's so recent, that's still being assessed. So I don't think we can give a number, except to say that that funding is drying up essentially. But with regards to your first question of DEI, As I also mentioned when I was talking about our guild awards, if you really look at a lot of the projects, a lot of the ones that win do have DEI, even if they don't use that term exclusively. And I think that a big reason for that comes down to the fact that, you know, we call it we call it some where it's stakeholder mapping and all of that stuff. But when you're doing this stakeholder mapping and these like technical terms, what you're really coming down to is who in our communities are in the most need and where is that help needed. Because also what I spoke about earlier, where it used to be just based on what the owner felt in terms of giving to a more strategic way. Part of that strategy and part of what we teach in our courses in the CSR Institute is about identifying these problems, but more importantly than identifying the surface problem, identifying the root. And a lot of the times, there are programs that specify women. One of our 7 groups is enterprise development, and I think you'll find that the majority of these enterprises are women-led enterprises because it's an untapped source of entrepreneurship and labor. A lot of the education programs will be, a lot of the scholarships will be for students who can't afford it a lot of the time. So then, you're talking about equity when it comes to poverty and the ability of a student to be able to go to higher education. So I would say, we don't have official figures on it. We just had the idea now of putting it into the questionnaire that is filled out. But it wouldn't be too much of a stretch to say that 75% or higher of our programs affect at least one of these groups. Now, the better question, and one thing that we can hopefully see when we include it in our research moving forward, is which groups are not being addressed. Because, like I said earlier, even though we have a couple of PWD programs among our membership, my own research into it while doing the Covenant for Shared Prosperity course is that this is an area that is underfunded, not just at the government level, but at the CSR level. Do I have qualitative information to back that up? No, but it would be certainly worth looking at by including it in our survey. But certainly in an anecdotal level, it's what I've observed that there are fewer programs for say PWD. Compared to women and the poor. So I think maybe the results of that research can help our members see like, hey, this is an area where we really need to step up our game.
Parang affirmative action, no? Alam natin sa area where the space where we are, itong mga corporate foundations, itong mga ginagawa namin, itong marginalized sector kailangan ng support, then dito kami. Doon kami pumupunta. So, very conscious on our part to be providing support for advocacies, for the beneficiaries, for communities that need our support. So, hindi lang, kanina we were talking about sa loob ng mga organizations, sa loob ng LCF, but also dun sa labas dun sa sinusuportahan namin as he was saying. And also, kanina, we were talking about reporting, we were talking about siguro project proposals. Palaging lumalabas naman yung DEI Sustainable Development Goals, ESG, DEI. Nandun sa first page na lang yan ng project proposal, nandun sa reporting, nandun siya. So it's about time na mag-focus tayo dyan at consciously ay tingnan natin how are we doing, reflect, and make amends, and see how else we can improve the practice.
Any other questions? Alright. Very interesting conversation, no? So we'll take that up sa conference, no? So at this point, thank you very much for those who have raised the questions and started the conversation going. And thank you, Sir Shan and Sir Edric.
Ito ba siya?
Thank you.